alien spider monsters, giant man-eating plants, color-changing bullet worms. On this unknown planet, there are dangers everywhere. Two survivors arrived at the crashed spaceship to search for supplies. They turned and found large bloodstains on the ground. They followed the bloodstains. The two were so scared they didn't dare to breathe. Fortunately, the monster didn't notice them. Then they quickly ran to the cargo hold. Suddenly, they saw a monster with its mouth wide open, and they ran away in a panic. Will they be able to escape this ordeal? Today, let's come together to watch the latest Hollywood disaster blockbuster. It's packed with high-energy thrills and chills. Without further ado, the story begins. The meteorite swarm suddenly struck the interstellar mining ship. The system detected danger and issued an alarm. In the stasis pod, miner Kevin hadn't reacted yet. When he was forcefully activated into survival mode, the AI assistant assembled an emergency spacesuit for him. After that, the stasis pod was ejected from the ship. Affected by the shockwave of the explosion, countless stasis pods collided chaotically in space. Some crashed into each other, resulting in death and destruction. While the lucky ones were launched to an unknown planet, Kevin was terrified. At this moment, the stasis pod began to plummet rapidly. Some exploded due to excessive heat. Fortunately, Kevin escaped once again. Suddenly, rugged mountains appeared ahead. He was scared and changed direction. Stabilizing, he prepared to land.
Please brace for impact.
Fortunately, he landed safely in the end. Then Kevin prepared to check the situation outside. Suddenly, the stasis pod overturned, and the spacesuit was torn. Kevin hurriedly sprayed repair glue on the tear. At this moment, the AI assistant warned that the oxygen level was only at 40%. He was about to ask about the ship's location. A flaming spaceship suddenly appeared before Kevin. Kevin was thrown back by the shockwave of the explosion. Fortunately, he was protected by his spacesuit and was not seriously harmed. At this point, the AI assistant indicated that this was an unknown planet. As the first person to discover it, Kevin could name it, but Kevin didn't want to deal with this artificial intelligence right now. He asked how far they were from their destination. Kevin was told it was very far away. However, Kevin didn't want to spend the rest of his life here. In order to find his surviving teammates, he hurriedly used the communicator to call for others. However, he received no response. That wasn't even the worst part, because the assistant said the oxygen levels on this planet were extremely low. If Kevin didn't find an oxygen supply quickly, he would definitely suffocate and die. Scared, Kevin rushed to search for an oxygen pack. At this moment, he was hungry, cold, and filled with fear, and the ground beneath him was extremely difficult to traverse. To make matters worse, his spacesuit malfunctioned and emitted alarms. At that moment, a fire suddenly appeared ahead. Kevin hurriedly ran over and saw a stasis pod ahead. He immediately approached to check the situation. To his surprise, there was an oxygen pack inside. Just as Kevin was about to take it out, he was startled and quickly stepped back. Then Kevin held back his nausea to inspect the oxygen pack. He found that the oxygen pack was damaged. Kevin had to leave and search elsewhere, but he didn't notice several claw marks on the stasis pod. Fortunately, after walking for a while, he discovered a survivor. Both were very happy to see each other. The other was named Dwayne. He was a communications technician on the ship. Dwayne was currently trying to send a distress signal to Earth. Kevin asked if he knew where they were. Dwayne said that before he was ejected from his escape pod, he had seen the navigation route of the ship. Dwayne discovered that the company chose to pass through an asteroid belt to save fuel, which led to the collision with a meteor and their crash. And now they might be the only two survivors. At this moment, Kevin asked how long it would take for the rescue team to arrive. Upon receiving the signal, Dwayne replied that it would take at least 8 months for the signal to reach Earth. After that, they would send the fastest ship. In about 2.5 years, they could be rescued. Kevin was extremely frustrated upon hearing this. He hurriedly asked what they would do for those 2 years. Dwayne was quite optimistic. He urged Kevin to help quickly. At this moment, Kevin saw a cable that wasn't connected, so he quickly crouched down to connect it. After finishing, Kevin turned around, and he found Dwayne's flashlight on the ground, but Dwayne had disappeared. Just then, Kevin discovered that the signal transmitter was operational. He hurriedly sent a distress signal to Earth. Then he shouted Dwayne's name, but after calling for a long time, Dwayne didn't appear. At this point, his oxygen could only last for 4 hours, so Kevin took Dwayne's gun and left. The AI assistant informed him that there were oxygen supplies near the crash site. After hearing this, Kevin set off in that direction, but he hadn't gone far when he discovered that the route planned by the assistant led through a cliff. Kevin angrily cursed. He thought about how he would soon suffocate to death. Kevin fell into despair. Suddenly, a distress call came through the communicator. Kevin immediately asked what had happened. The woman said that her leg was trapped in the stasis pod, and she couldn't move. She hoped Kevin could come to save her, but Kevin said that if he went to save her, he wouldn't have enough oxygen left to reach the supply station. The woman replied that she had an oxygen pack with her. Thinking about how unreliable the assistant had been, the so-called supplies might not even exist. In the end, he chose to trust the woman, Helen. Then Kevin headed towards the location Helen had given him. At this time, night descended. The entire planet was plunged into darkness. Kevin turned on the flashlight, and he was about to approach Helen's location. Suddenly, Kevin saw a shadow flash by. He hurriedly asked the AI assistant to activate the scan, but the assistant said that this function was currently unavailable because it has been shut down by the company. Kevin cursed in frustration, but he still mustered his courage and walked towards Helen's direction. Just then, the system detected that a creature was approaching him. Kevin hurriedly took out his gun to be on guard. Suddenly, someone fired a flare. Startled, Kevin dropped his gun and ran. The monster chased after him upon hearing the sound. Fortunately, Kevin fell into a crevice that the monster couldn't enter, but it continued to pursue him from above. Terrified, Kevin ran and fell down a slope, but he wasn't seriously injured. Kevin noticed that his spacesuit was damaged. He began to repair it again. After that, Kevin stood up and found many stasis pods ahead. The flare must have been fired by survivors, so Kevin ran over to try to join the others. Suddenly, he heard Dwayne's voice nearby. Kevin followed the sound and saw a familiar face. He was about to go over to him, but Kevin was frightened and hid behind a stasis pod. He saw the monster devouring Dwayne completely. Kevin began to question his life. At this moment, the AI assistant alerted him that there were corpses everywhere. Kevin told it to shut up. However, the monster seemed to have caught the sound, and they all began to converge towards Kevin. Suddenly, the stasis pod made a noise indicating an incoming call. The monsters all lunged towards it, but Kevin wasn't there. It turned out that it had all been a plan between him and Helen. At this moment, Kevin was hiding in a nearby stasis pod. He thought he could escape once the monsters left. Suddenly,
You have a call request.
the monsters were all drawn to the bright light. Kevin and Helen used the same method. As the monsters went to check the other stasis pods, Kevin hurriedly ran out. The monsters relentlessly chased after him, but strangely, when Kevin reached an open area, the monsters all suddenly stopped. Then they began to retreat. Kevin had no idea what was happening, but now he didn't have much oxygen left. Kevin could only hurry to find Helen. Suddenly, many glowing flying insects swooped in around him. Kevin was mesmerized by them, when suddenly, the insects turned blood red and attacked him. Kevin was so scared that he hurriedly fled. Suddenly, there were so many dangers in this place. No wonder the monsters didn't dare to enter. Soon, Kevin was swallowed by a worm. In a critical moment, he activated the cardiac defibrillator. The monster felt pain and spat him out. Because of the previous action, Kevin's oxygen level was down to less than 5%, and the worms were all coming at him. Kevin jumped into a nearby cave in fear. Unexpectedly, this was the nest of the flying insects. Fortunately, Kevin was protected by his spacesuit. After emerging from the cave, Kevin found that he was very close to Helen. At this point, his oxygen level was down to 1%. Kevin ran with all his might. In the final moment, he successfully found Helen's stasis pod. After entering, Helen immediately connected him to the oxygen supply. After a brief rest, Kevin helped her free her trapped leg. Fortunately, Helen's leg wasn't broken. Then the two prepared to search for shelter. Just then, a large number of monsters surrounded them. Kevin grabbed Helen and ran. Fortunately, Kevin had experience in dodging monster attacks, and the two quickly spotted the crashed spaceship. They ran desperately, and the monsters showed no signs of giving up. They relentlessly pursued from behind. At this moment, the two dashed into the wreckage. But suddenly, they tripped over the oxygen hose. The monsters were getting closer. Helen quickly took out the flare gun and shot at the monsters to drive them away. Kevin was very excited by this. He praised her for being impressive. Then Helen fired another shot to the side, and the other monsters were drawn away. The two seized the opportunity to continue fleeing, but the monsters quickly reacted and charged towards them. Fortunately, they successfully entered the spaceship. Kevin just wanted to rush inside and hide, but Helen stopped him, insisting they needed to shut the door. At this moment, the monsters were getting closer, but the spaceship's door was particularly difficult to close. In a critical moment, Helen finally found the door closing procedure. The door successfully closed, slicing the attacking monsters in half. Looking at the terrifying monsters before them, Helen felt a lingering fear, while Kevin was extremely excited. Suddenly, a loud crash startled them. The monsters were banging on the door. However, the spaceship's door was strong, and they couldn't get in. Then the two explored inside the spaceship. They wanted to check the cargo hold. Fortunately, there was enough food inside for them to last 10 years, and the undamaged cabin had stable atmosphere. They didn't have to worry about oxygen either. Just as the two were about to explore elsewhere, they discovered a large amount of bloodstains ahead. Following the bloodstains to the end, they saw a monster emerge. The two were so scared they didn't dare to breathe. After the monster left, they heard strange noises around them, so they hurriedly turned around. The two turned and ran. The monster heard the noise and chased after them. When they reached the cabin with plenty of oxygen, they took off their helmets. Suddenly, Helen noticed that there were eggs on Kevin's back. Kevin realized they were the eggs of the flying insects, so he instructed Helen to take them off and throw them at the monster. Then the two escaped to the cargo hold. At this moment, the monster also caught up with them. Kevin immediately blocked its mouth with oversized gum. Then he and Helen quickly ran away, but the monster soon spat out the gum to chase after Helen. Kevin had a sudden idea and ran to start the drilling machine. He asked Helen, the administrator, for the password. Kevin quickly entered the password and successfully started the system. But unexpectedly, Kevin turned off all the lights. Helen also didn't expect him to be so foolish. At this moment, the monster was slowly approaching. Helen carefully climbed up to the top shelf, causing the monster to miss its attack. But now there was only a glass barrier between them. Helen's heart was racing with tension. Fortunately, the monster left after searching for a while. At this time, Kevin was still fiddling with the system, but the system informed him that he could only operate the drilling machine manually. So Kevin crawled in to start the tutorial mode. On the other side, Helen was discovered by the monster. She hurriedly fled while carrying the flashlight. In a critical moment, Kevin finally started the drilling machine. After Kevin successfully eliminated the monster, the two stood by the window to watch the sunrise. Next, they could spend a happy time here. The film ends here. The special effects of the movie were excellent, and the overall pacing was just right. The tense and terrifying atmosphere was well created. Although it was a low-budget production, it was surprising that there were several types of monsters. The artificial intelligence in it was primitive, which provided a lot of comedic moments. However, the film's theme wasn't innovative, and the alien monsters weren't very powerful. Moreover, the second half was very dark, which affected the viewing experience. At the end, there was clearly another monster in the base, and possibly even more. But for some reason, it went straight to the ending. It felt too rushed. The male lead's performance was also indescribable. Moreover, he knew he didn't have enough oxygen but kept talking, which can only be said that his appearance and strength are not up to par. I wouldn't recommend watching the original film. Just check out my commentary instead. If you enjoy my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is the greatest encouragement for me.